Alright, so we're going to be painting a banana here. I've already got my drawing established. Drawn the shape of the banana, the shadows. Um, we want to find out what the color of the banana is. Obviously, yellow, but what type of yellow. Um, so if you have your color charts made, you can pull out your color chart and look. Um, you can see that it's pretty close to like just pure nickel Azo yellow, maybe with a touch of the red put in. But yeah, it's very like that warm yellow color. And then for the shadow down here, if you were able to do your secondary color chart, you can see it's gonna be mostly like an orange with a bit of blue mixed in. It's a very warm, like orangey yellow color. So that's how to get the second color. And then for the spots for the browns, it's going to be over here, sort of a mix of orange and violet. So what are those two colors? So the middle color, the main color in these two are both red. So it's going to be red with some blue and yellow mixed in, if that makes sense. Just going to be using three colors. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. But to start with, we're going to put our first layer of yellow on. So I want to take that yellow that we're going to use. I'm just going to use it. I just have some right out of the tube here. I want to get it nice and don't want it too intense yet. I want my lightest color. There we go. That should be good. I want my lightest color on here first. I'm just going to push the brush down, follow the path of the line as best I can. Sometimes that's not very good. We all have our days, right? So I'm going to paint the whole thing with this color. This is going to be our base underlying color, is this nickel Azo Yellow. I don't think there's any parts in here. Not the shadows, though. I don't think I'll do the shadows that color. Those are going to be different. Maybe in sort of like a purpley color to offset the hot yellows, just to give it some contrast. All right, so that one's done already. So while that's drying, we're gonna mix up our second color, our second base color, which is gonna be that the shadow side. Let's see if I can point to it. The shadow side on that banana. So we're gonna mix up a little bit of yellow with our red. And a touch of blue. Don't want too much. See how I'm pulling from it and then putting it down in a separate place, and then adding it to it. So if you're not sure if it's going to work or not, because it will look different here on the palette, you can take a scrap piece of paper, put some on there, and then hold it up against the object you're going to use and look at it. And you'll be able to get a pretty accurate representation. This is still too yellow, so I'm going to keep adding in my blue, adding in a bit of red. Let's try that here. That's feeling a lot closer. So I'm going to use that for the shadow. Now, coming back to my drawing, to tell if it's dry, I'm going to use the back of my hand, just sort of like, just gently tap it. If it still feels cold, it's wet. And it's kind of at that wet point where if you put paint down, not all the painting is wet, so some of it will spread out, some of it will get stuck in those weird like dry areas, so it's gonna look really wonky. This up here though is dry, so while I'm waiting, I'm going to switch colors and mix up some of that third color we're gonna use. I said the main color was red. I'm gonna use red, mix it with some blue, some yellow. That's too much yellow. Some blue. So that's a nice warm purple there. Some of the stuff on the banana isn't purple. Not purple. What am I saying? It's a warm orange. So some of the sorry, I'm getting lost here. Thinking. Let's see. I'm sorry, I got thinking about purples and oranges and sort of got lost. That some of the darkest areas on the banana, like around this part up here, you know, they could almost be like an off purple color. When I say off, I don't mean like that looks strange. I just mean more not quite a rich purple. You know what I mean? Very neutral purple. I'm just gonna mix up sort of a neutral purple with the yellow I already have here. It's pretty dark, isn't it? When it had a bit of red water to it, tone it down. But see, you can sort of see there's purple in there. So I'm gonna start to use some of that. Also going to pull up some of this so it doesn't dry quite so dark. I want to come back to that later. Okay. Which brush had it? Was it this one? Yeah. So start to dot that in there. Sort of putting in places. Clean brush. So using a clean brush, you can sort of pull the colors around in areas where it's not quite so dark. Get some softer notes in there. Let's see. These don't have to be perfect. This is just more. I'm even going to use some of this color down here a bit just to help unify things. You know, that shadow color on the back side here. Maybe a bit over here on this side. Just for unity. Okay. What else? So I'm going to jump back over to this area we were working on. This larger area here. A little hard to do with a smaller brush. There we go. Get one nice big long brush stroke. Just again following that edge by pushing the brush down. Brush isn't taking water very well. Go. I'm just going to soften the edge up. I don't want it to be a real sharp edge. So I'm using clean water, just sort of going along that edge. You can see it softens it quite nicely. All right, that's going to have to dry a bit. While that is drying, jump back over to this color here. Put some of that down here while it's still wet. just for fun. You really use a clean brush. So pull it out into some of these areas here. Go. I want the lines to be too sharps again. Want to be nice and sort of misty right now. All right. So that's gonna have to dry for a minute. We can come up here and do some of these brown colors that we have going on. And again, the brown for this is just yellow with a bit of red, bit of blue. Mix that up. And the spots on the upper part up here aren't going to be that dark. Not near as dark as the shadow spots. If you have a toothbrush, this is a great way to use a toothbrush. You can also use if you have a sponge, like a natural sponge, or even a not natural sponge. Those all work pretty well to get textures in this. I'm going to use paper towel since I don't have any of those easily accessible. I'll put some colors in there. I don't want it to look too ripe, right? Just a little bit. It's a nice thing about being an artist. You can sort of, to a degree, say, you know, I want to de-age this banana just a little bit. You can do that. So up here near the top, it actually gets more reddish. Add some yellow and red to the mix. Yeah. Just gonna drop that in here. Might be a bit too much red, too much yellow. Soften some of these edges. And when I go to soften edges, I want to just look for areas that stand out, that look a bit strange. You know, bananas don't have these sharp lines usually. They're all sort of mottled color, I guess is a good word for it. So I want to soften any of the edges that look out of place. All right, add some more blue to that. Getting into our purples up here, I think. Okay. Water these down a bit. Not all of them, just some of them. Just to get them to their proper place. This is looking pretty good. I'll take a bit of paint out here so it's not all one unified color. Okay. It's still wet. Checking. It's mostly dry. I'm gonna start painting into the area here. So, doing a similar thing. Just gonna use that same color, a little bit darker, to create our shallow shapes. And again, going along the edges, softening. You don't want real hard edges on here. I do want to, I think it's important. I think a lot of things are important. But with this, I think it's important to have sort of a balance of colors and darks. And I want to make sure that the darks on the shadow side are darker, obviously, than the darks on the light side. If that makes sense. Even my shadow yellow can be darker. So I might go back in and put another layer of yellow on top of that, because it's not this dark to this yellow to this yellow. There's not a whole lot of difference. But if you look in the image, if you look at the banana itself, there's a pretty big shift in, like, you know, yellow up here to yellow here. It's a big shift. But to do that, I have to wait for this brown to dry. So, while we're waiting, let's do our shadow, which in the photograph looks blue, but I'm gonna make it a bit more purple, I think. Partly because it'll sort of go along with everything here. Okay. So, put a bit of shadow on this side. And it's still looking pretty green. Maybe that'd be better. Yeah, it's more like a neutrally purple here. Excuse me. Alright. I'm just gonna lay some color in. Take my clean brush, clean brush, go around the outside edges of it. Pull that out, pull that away from, create that nice, wonderful soft edge that you see. I waited a bit too long for this. This isn't Arch's paper. I forget how versatile it is compared to other papers. Arch's is very versatile. Has a long open time. You know, you put a colored paint down and it'll stay wet for much longer. Other paints. Couple different reasons for it. They put the size into the paper itself when it's being made. Like when it's so it's on the interior of it. As it's going through the process, they include it with the paper fibers. And then also they put it in the after it comes out in sheets, they put size on the exterior as well. They spray it, so so it has size throughout. So the water is very, or I'm sorry, the paint is very buoyant. Just kind of sits on top of all that. And not that many papers have that, unfortunately, because it's a probably really expensive and kind of a pain to do, I imagine. So, there we go. Nice color in there. All right. Okay. That's looking good. Good color here. All right. So I'm gonna come back up here. This feels light, dry enough to put my next layer of color on. So you see how I'm putting down the paint first and then just dipping it in water to help keep the water clean. See a lot of students just take their fully loaded brush and dip it right and clean their brush right away, and it really gets the water dark pretty quickly. So if you can avoid that, I think it'll help. Alright, so I have a relatively darker version. I might go a bit darker. I don't want it too dark. Alright, let's try that. So again, going over this. Ooh, that's pretty dark. Watercolor does dry lighter. I'm not sure it's going to dry that much lighter. Let's see. Clean brush, clean water. I'm going to go along the edge here. Alright. Get that nice soft edge on there. What am I doing? I want to create another darker edge. Get our delineator line on here. Since there's water on both sides, it's going to hopefully soften on both sides. Going to spread out. I'll put it out a little bit where the edges don't point. There we go. So, going through, double checking everything's so that's definitely better, right? The dark and the light value of it. It's a bit more orange than I feel it should be. I want to go over it with a bluer shade. Maybe with a purple in there too. Unfortunately, I can't do it very dark. Not near as dark as I would like to. Let's see what happens if I just drop it in here. It's still wet, so I can do a little bit. And hopefully that'll tone down some of that orangey bit to it. Yeah, I think that's gonna help. Yeah. It's almost like a green color I'm using. Alright. Okay, that's looking better. So what I'm doing now is I'm just getting a darker color here. Sort of a neutral. Again, I just want to just gonna drop it in here. These are gonna be for more of the spots. I'll let them dry for a minute and see how they're how they're uh, how they're going about their business, and then I'll adjust them as needed. Putting a bit more texture up here, a bit more character. There is a bit of like a splayed furriness. I guess is a word. So I'm going to take this brush. I'm going to create a just pushing it down as hard as I can. There we go. Got a nice splayed edge. Sort of like pull out some of that. Sort of like that. Let's see. What else needs help? So coming back to these splotchy edges, I'm just gonna start to pull out some of those sharper edges, sharper lines. Just to give it a bit more character. We're pretty close. So the closer you get to the end of your painting, the more you want to stop and just look at it. If you just keep, you know, not messing around, but you know what I mean, like noodling around with it, you run the risk of it not, you run the risk of overworking it, right? So when you start reaching a point to where like, oh, I'm not quite sure what else I can do with it, that's when you want to pull back, you know, take a minute, just start working slower, observe more, just look at the painting, look at the what it is you're painting, the subject. So the more I look at it, the more I see it, there could be a bit more like shadow connection over here. So I'm gonna put that in there. Put a bit of that. Smooth out the edges. Let's see if I can get that a little darker too. Uh, so putting that in there, that's gonna help give that shadow unification. Looking down here, it looks a little pale. Might think about darkening this area here, but maybe not. Not sure yet. Part of me wants to put in some sort of color on the backside, you know, like a brown for the table, or really any color, like a purple would look nice here. But I'm not sure it would add enough to it. Sometimes just the white of the paper with watercolor is enough to really give it a lot of life, if that makes sense. So I might add some more color onto this, just because it's because I need uh, because it is a bit light, but also because this color up here is sort of a different color. I didn't put in the right color. This is like a bluish, not bluish, but like a purple, sort of a dull purple. And then this up here is more green. So I'm going to put another color in and smooth out the area around the outside of it again, because it will help darken it and it'll help unify it. There we go. That's looking more unified. There could be more. Really want a nice dark edge right at the base of it, right where that shadow starts. So if you can, really put in a nice, good shadow in there. And if you do it while it's wet, it'll sort of spread out from there. But don't put one down here because this banana is sort of in the air. want to smooth this area out a little bit. All right, so what else? If it gets sort of like mottled and messy, you can take a softer brush. I like to use a hockey brush for it. I don't have one at hand right now, so I'm just gonna use this brush and sort of, it's almost like a feather brush, sort of pulling at the edges, pushing at the edges, just getting a nice, more unified look. Yeah, okay. So I think that's where I'm gonna stop here. Like a nice light texture on the banana. Yep, I think that's good. Hope this was helpful. If you want to, post your images of this, would love to see them. Also, if you want to ask questions about colors, about anything, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer any questions. All right, have a good day. Thanks.